When I first entered the course, I was curious about the relationship between how the brain learned and movement. As a dancer, I have certainly seen the impact of people watching dance and even noticed that something really profound happened to them when they got to participate, but I wanted to know why. As a teaching artist, I noticed the same thing. When I went into classrooms and had interactions with children, their whole experience of learning, their attitudes were transformed. And then further, years later, out in the world, out of context, I'd run into people and they'd say, "Hey, Miss Kimberly, remember way back when?" And even if they didn't remember the specific lesson, they remembered something about the time that we had together. It was time to know how this was happening and why. What I didn't know was everything else that I would learn on my way to trying to understand what the movement that I was doing in classrooms had to do with how the brain learned effectively and efficiently. I was pleasantly surprised as I was taken back to school to understand constructivist learning theory, because it's very compatible with the way that I work as a choreographer. The idea that instead of my giving steps to students to do to help them remembering an idea, we're going to work together. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to facilitate a learning experience by which the kids can figure out how to make sense of the material for themselves. So having the background, the work of Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky and others who have taught us about the importance of working in collaboration, in community, of how making sure that our basic needs are met so that we can even pay attention to the process of learning has been an invaluable experience. I've had a chance to reconnect with the idea of assessment and not feel it as such a scary thing. That again, as a dancer, assessment is that final moment where I have to know, do I know the dance? Do my dancers know the dance? And what can I do to help them learn it before we hit the stage? The process of beginning with the end in mind so that every learner, every performer is successful. In the course on literacy, I got challenged to consider myself as a teacher of reading. This was a huge stretch. Often when I go into classrooms, it is as a supplemental interloper to make sure that everything happens in an organized manner. But even though I am attending to benchmarks and standards in my art form, I'm not often required to make sure that I'm attending to benchmarks and standards in other areas. I got to learn the difference between what reading is and literacy. And this was really profound because since I spent an entire 20 weeks in a Head Start classroom that was English language learners whose primary language was Spanish, I got to consider what is it even to be literate or to learn the alphabet when you are speaking a different language at home. In our course on instructional strategies, now this is what I feel like in my naivete I came to the course wanting to know. The structures of the brain, how the brain works, and how I might think about creating learning experiences that affected that, but I never would have been able to attend to it with the depth or understanding that I have now had I not gone through everything that preceded it. So in the following segments, my attempt is going to be to give you the best of highlights of what I have learned about how all of this moves, how, as I always say, we are at our best when we are dancing. It may not be rocket science, but I have learned that it's neuroscience.